This podcast is brought to you by kitchen scissors. So before this, I'd been using knives to cut all of my green onions, which, as a clumsy person, is an intensely dangerous thing to do for your fingers. That was until Yeji told me about the amazingness that Korean people do in using kitchen scissors in all of their cooking. Now my fingers are not only happier, but much safer. Kitchen scissors. Go get yourself some today. Hello everyone, my name is En.
And my name is Yeji, and this is Our Own Canon.
We created this show as a way for us to discuss and debate pieces of art, literature, philosophy, television, film.
Basically, anything and everything that has left an impression on us as Asian American college-age nerds with social anxiety and affinity for Vietnamese iced coffee.
Nerds, which we absolutely are, so get prepared to get lost in the weeds.
But don't worry, we'll offset with enough irony and sarcassery to keep things not boring for y'all.
And of course, thank you for listening and supporting the show. We hope you love what we have prepared today. All right, Yeji. So before we get started and start talking about things, because once we get started, we're not gonna stop. Uh, why not you introduce what we're trying to do with this episode and what we're trying to do with this episode format structure in general.
Right, so this is actually something that we talked about in our first episode, sort of introducing the segments as we sort of go along. We think that it'll be kind of a fun thing that'll give y'all something to look forward to and something for us to sort of keep fresh for y'all, at least for the first 10 episodes. Hopefully it doesn't get too monotonous after that. But this episode structure we like to call a topic. Spelled TOPPIC, sort of a play on words, like a topic, right? Like a general thing to sort of speak about, but also a top pick, some piece of media, art, literature that really, really speaks to us, that we both generally have the same ideas about, that we both have the same sentiments towards, and just want to spend a little bit of time sort of dissecting. We will definitely have things that we disagree on, but that'll come a little bit later, so stay tuned for that for sure.
All right then. So what are we talking about today?
Well, I have a film for us to discuss today. It really isn't anything all that official. It's just a movie that's really, really near and dear to my heart. Something that I have enjoyed watching for a really long time. And I'm definitely someone who comes back to movies and shows and things and watches them pretty often after. If that's, I don't know if anyone does that either, but
I think
I'm
a lot of
definitely the kind of
people do
person who
that.
will just, yeah, I just come back to movies like 10 times after I've already watched them, and I'll be like, okay, this is fun. I know what's gonna happen, but it's still fun.
Mhm.
I should probably tell you what the film is. It's Always Be My Maybe, starring Ali Wong and Randall Park and Keanu Reeves, of course. Um,
Yes. Yes.
if I told you, if I was like, if I just approached you on the street, right? And I was like, yeah, there's a movie with Ali Wong, Randall Park, and Keanu Reeves. You would not believe me.
I wouldn't. I didn't when you told me about it the first
No.
time, frankly.
Yeah, no. You'd be like, what kind of crack are you smoking? Because I want some. No, yeah, no, this movie is just an amalgamation of so many random moving parts, but they do them all really, really well while also sort of keeping that feel of like a very classic, basic rom com. Which I was reading over some of the reviews while I was preparing this episode, and I think that that was the general consensus of how people sort of felt about it, was that it was really cute and had good vibes, and it was kind of random, but overall it was still pretty basic. But I think that's one of the charms of it, honestly. And I actually have yet to hear you sort of speak to your experience the first time you watched this movie, because you watched it pretty recently, actually. So
Yeah, I watched it
tell me a little
yesterday.
bit about. Tell me a little bit about what you thought.
Well, I think in general, I think it was a really enjoyable movie. Like there's uh I think it's like one of those things where most people can like enjoy it and like get something out of it. It's not like super, what's the word? It's not like going crazy about anything. It's running very like um very like nice, easy to like understand and digest like premises. And sometimes I think that's like what makes this like type of movie something that's very like nice to come back and like rewatch, right? It's got
Mm-hmm.
it's got a lot going on with a lot of like strong emotions and things like that, um but it's not like it's not like something like super like out there, out of the ballpark, like crazy wild, that's gonna make it like not
Mm-hmm.
always appealing on rewatches, right? Like there are
Mm-hmm.
some things that I think are
Right.
genuinely really cool, um
Mm-hmm.
but like I wouldn't rewatch it again because it's just like, what the heck's going on?
Mm-hmm. Right, right. No, it's I think that movie is just filled with really good vibes, and I think that sometimes generally nowadays rom-coms have a tendency to sort of push the boundaries of what makes people uncomfortable. Um because everyone finds romantic gestures differently. You know, everyone has sort of different boundaries for where they draw the line for certain acts of service or certain things that they, I don't know. It's just personally for me, there aren't a lot of rom coms that speak to me the way that this rom com spoke to me. Just simply because I think a lot of romantic comedies are not necessarily realistic. They don't draw from reality. They draw from fantasy or
Hmm.
wishful thinking or wish
Yeah.
fulfillment. And this was a story that I felt like I could actually empathize with and pull from my own experiences of, which was really really nice, especially because there was such sort of like subtle culture integration into it as well. Like I've never actually seen a rom-com, I guess besides like Crazy Rich Asians, that actually starred two Asian people,
Yeah, not that I
like
can
that
think
was
about.
really really cool. Especially because they're a little bit older as well. I think
Hmm.
that I also find that some rom-coms have just this like really young, like almost teenaged cast, and a part of me is like, you do realize that there is a very specific set of the population that's going to empathize with this, and they're like right on the cusp of like growing out of like growing out of that.
Yeah,
And so it was
teenage
nice to
rom
see
com is
something.
like a demographic that like you actually lose your demographic pretty quickly. Like they grow up pretty
Yeah,
quickly.
yeah, it's
Adult
really
romances don't
fascinating.
have that problem too much. Not the same way, at least.
Yeah, I'd say that I just generally find more adult, more established like rom-coms to be a little bit more timeless. Like for instance, there was this movie, oh god, Perks of a Wallflower. That's not necessarily a rom-com, but there were a lot of romantic elements in it. And I remember watching that when I was a teenager and being like, "Oh my god, this is my film. This is my movie. I love it so much." And I still do. But I rewatched some of the scenes that I romanticized in that movie when I was a teenager, and I'm like, that was so toxic. Like, that was so toxic. Like, it was just unbelievably. Some of the scenes in that were just unbelievably bad, but those are the things that teenagers like, you know?
Yeah.
So it just, yeah, the pendulum swings back and forth for me sometimes on that. But so you enjoyed the movie.
Yeah, something that you were getting at that I find really interesting and that I really like about this movie was how it handles relationships and how it like kind of emphasizes all the
Mm-hmm.
messiness that's in there. You know, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
other types of rom-coms tend to be about like these perfect like grand romantic gestures and things like that, and there's a place for that in media, but that's also not
Mm-hmm.
really how relationships completely work. And I think delving into like
Right.
the parts of relationships that are kind of like not great, but still fundamentally like they don't. These are things that make relationships fundamentally bad, but they're also a part of them that are just like have to be accepted about them. Like it shows how imperfect even good relationships can be.
Right. Yeah. No, I definitely agree with you 100% on that. I think that while not all rom-coms do this, I don't think all rom-coms that do it very well. Um, Messy relationships are not an aesthetic. And I think that that's something that a lot of romance, just in general, right? Not even just in rom coms, sort of struggles to portray. Like, messiness is not toxicity. Messiness is not going out of your way to be spiteful towards someone or petty towards them in a bad situation or having a really, really explosive fight with them. That's not having a messy relationship, you
Hmm.
know? And I think that this movie did such a good job in delineating, like, no, they're not toxic for each other. They're actually very good for each other, but they're human beings, and
Yeah.
that's why it's messy. It's not because that they're not compatible. It's not because they hate each other, like, you know, innately, and they can't stand each other, but they're fighting through it for love's sake. It's like, no, they're just human, and that's normal. And it's normal to have problems when you're human, you know, in your
Yeah.
relationships. And so I really do think that the writers put a lot of purposeful effort into really making sure that they didn't depict anything as like, no, this person is actually really toxic and it
Well,
won't hold up under scrutiny.
well, that's not true because something very good about like the piece too is that there are actually like exaggeratedly over the top depictions of like actually awful relationships in the movie too, which I
Yeah.
think help actually really elevate the whole thing by like juxtaposing like Marcus and Sasha's relationship with like all these other relationships that like clearly
Yeah.
aren't working, and like yeah, they're not working in like
Yeah.
really exaggerated ways, and that's part of the comedy of it.
Yeah.
But I also think like that
Mhm.
elevated ridiculousness of like how obviously bad these relationships are also like
Mhm.
makes the comparison easier to grasp, you know. um
Yeah.
it's
And
also
it
really
offers
funny.
a really easy element of comedy. Yeah, no, it's really funny. I was literally going to say that. Okay, so we've delved into why we sort of love the overall theme of this movie, but maybe we should sort of tell the audience what happens, just in case you know you haven't seen the movie. We'll just give you like a brief summary. So spoilers ahead for sure, because we're literally going to be dissecting certain scenes. So definitely spoilers. But I'd love to hear your summation of this movie.
Damn,
To be fair, you've
I
also
was
seen
gonna
it.
drop this on you since you were the one who rewatched it, but you're throwing it on me now. So I
Yeah, but
guess I
you
got no
watched it
choice.
yesterday.
That I mean, true. But there's also a cut blooper reel where I literally forget every single character's name. So like, am I the best one for this job? I don't think so. But you
Here,
know,
I'll write the
let's give
names
it
down
a
for you.
shot. So, uh, Marcus and Sasha are childhood friends. The movie starts out with them like
Hmm.
hanging out and growing up together until like sometime in their teens, probably like senior year, something like that. Um, so they've been friends this whole time, and then Marcus's mother dies in a tragic accident. I don't think they say more than that, do they? No, no, they
Hmm.
don't.
Yeah, no, it's really
Um,
just an accident. Yeah.
yeah, and then while they're all both sad about it because you know that's Marcus's mom, but also Sasha's grew up with her as well. Like she kind of
Hmm.
helped raise her. Um,
Yeah.
so they're both sad about that. Then they have sex, and then they get mad at each other afterwards, and it is an emotional roller coaster. Like that whole like 5 minutes, it's just like all sorts of things going on. They get mad at each other, and they just stop talking for the next something years. They're how old are they when we get back to that? Like they're
So
probably like
they
in their
had sex
30s,
like their
something like
senior
that.
year. Yeah, they had their senior year of high school, and then they stopped talking, and they're like in their 30s,
Yeah, Sasha's
maybe
like
edging
pretty
on
deep into
like,
her career now, so I would think like
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, yeah. And she's very successful. Yes.
yes. So we come back, and Sasha is now a very successful chef who cooks, because that's what chefs do. I was gonna say, I was, I was gonna say she cooks Asian food, but I don't think that's like, I'm not sure that's like a true
No,
fact.
that's not. Yeah, it's not like the only thing that she
Yeah, I
cooks.
do
She
know at
cooks
the
like
end,
elevated.
yeah, elevated
Yes.
Asian or whatever. Yeah, they do touch on it, Yeah. So she
Mm-hmm.
probably has some sort of like bent on that. But
Uh-huh. Are you sure you watched this yesterday?
yes, but I was also studying for an exam, so like, you know, I
Dude.
might just like throw in some like cellular bio in the middle and just be like, yeah, and remember that one scene where like the DNA replicate um okay, so
Okay, so where's
Sasha,
Marcus at right now? Where's
huh?
Marcus?
Marcus
Where's
is
Marcus?
yes, Marcus is still in uh he's still at home. I think they're in San Francisco, right?
Yeah, San Fran. Mm-hmm.
Whereas Sasha is like around the country, opening restaurants, being a big
Mm-hmm.
deal. She's a celebrity. It's really cool and
Mm-hmm.
all that. But she
Yeah.
decides to go open a restaurant back at home in San Francisco. So she
Mm-hmm.
flies back there. Um, and hijinks ensue. Marcus and Sasha like bump into each other and reconnect. At this
Mm-hmm.
time, they're both dating other people. So like they've kind of moved on with their
Mm-hmm.
life. Sasha is
Yeah,
dating like
Sasha's actually engaged.
yes. Oh yeah, she's engaged.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
See, that's not the most important thing I remember about Brandon Cho. Because there are much larger fish to fry than he was
Yeah,
engaged to Sasha.
you were
So
just so distracted by his cheekbones.
by his cheek, right?
Dude, Daniel Day Kim has like the most superior bone structure I've ever seen on an Asian man.
it is quite
It's
amazing.
crazy.
Those are some those are some chiseled jawlines.
I know. Okay, so
Um,
they're both dating other people, and
yes.
then,
And
well,
then
do they get together? Like, what happens?
well, you watched the movie multiple times. You tell me, but um, I think
I
some
guess I
like
could take over
important
here.
context to know about like the people they're dating is that Brendan Cho
Yeah.
is a total like hyper like business dude asshole who like does not care. He
Yes.
obviously does not care about his relationship at all. And Sasha
Mm-hmm.
kind of doesn't realize that, but it's very clear to the audience that like this dude is like not it. Um,
Yeah.
Whereas Marcus is dating Jenny, who is
Mm-hmm.
she's an interesting character. Uh, at,
She
at,
really is.
at first, she's just kind of like a weird like hipster who's like really into like social service and things like that. But later you'll see that she has some other personality traits that can be quite hilarious. Okay,
Yeah.
so they're
Honestly,
dating other
I loved
people.
her. She was so funny.
Yeah. So they're dating other people. They run into each
Do you not
other.
agree with me?
Sorry, I'm just trying to like remember where I'm at in the
Remember?
story. And like try not to get like the chronologic what's the word? Chronology of events mixed up. See, you shouldn't use big words if you don't know how to use them. Okay,
Do you want me to take over from here? I can take over from here.
yeah, save me, please.
Okay, yes, I will. I can do that. So, yeah, so they're dating other people and it's very clear that like there's a huge gap between them right now. So Marcus is still sort of stuck being like a younger person. You know, he's still in San Francisco. He doesn't really have a job,
He's
whereas
still playing with
Sasha
his high
has
school
been like
band.
yeah, which by the way, their music is pretty good. Like fight me on that if you want to, but I freaking love their music. The Balls song was so good.
It's got its
I'm
charm.
realizing how weird that sounds out of context. I promise it's like a song about like sports balls. I'm gonna move on
Yeah,
because
you're not
I
helping
just
your case.
okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so and Sasha is like hyper mature, you know. We sort of get a little bit of a glimpse of like from before when she's interacting with her parents and with Marcus's family that like she doesn't really have a very strong home life. Her parents are not really involved with her, and so she feels this like very elated sense of like self maturity, you know, like she's very independent. She feels like she doesn't have to rely on anyone else. She doesn't need anyone else. And yeah, so we're introduced to their significant others, and then there's a breaking point in the movie where Sasha and Brandon, earlier in the movie they were like, we're gonna take a break, and Brandon like goes off and cheats on her.
Yeah.
It was like they're like gonna be in like an open relationship for 2 months before they actually get married, like from their engagement. And like, yeah, and so
Yeah, I think
she
that's
dumps
a
him over the phone.
actually no, I was gonna say something
Yeah, that
about what I
was
like about that scene, but I think that's better in that analysis section. We're summarizing right now, so shut me up.
right. I really am excited to see sort of like how you feel about certain scenes, because I think that this might turn into a little bit of a fight because we might disagree on certain things, like little details. But anyways, she breaks up with Brandon, and then she sort of, talking a little bit more with Marcus, even though he's still with Jenny. And there's no boundary violation or anything going on here. I think they're just slowly becoming like friends again. Which is actually really cool to see, because it is sort of like a friends to enemies to friends to lovers sort of story, which I personally adore. And then it all sort of comes to a head when Sasha starts dating Keanu Reeves. And that's his name, is just Keanu Reeves, because it's Keanu Reeves playing himself.
So amazing. It's so good. It's so
It's
good.
so good. It's so good. And
It's fucking
and
genius
of
casting.
course, like right off the, I know it really is, but like right off the bat you can sort of see that their relationship is like very much sort of based only in physicality. Like they're sleeping together, and that seems to be sort of how everything started and why they're attracted to each other in the first place. And then they go on a double date with Marcus and Jenny, which ends violently. Is all I'm gonna say about that, because you really have to watch the movie to get the scope of how ridiculous that entire sequence is, but it's so good. And
Wonderful.
then Marcus also subsequently ends his relationship with Jenny on the same night. Marcus and Sasha sleep together again, and then they're sort of in a steady relationship from that point on. But then it sort of, starts to climax into the conflict where Sasha is posed with an opportunity to open a restaurant somewhere else. I believe New
New
York, if
York.
I'm not mistaken. It's
I do
another,
remember
yeah,
that
it's
for some
another
reason.
big
It's New
city.
York.
Okay, it's in New York. And she offers to take Marcus with her. And this whole time, too, we sort of seen a little bit of dissonance between them in terms of like Marcus having to grapple with the fact that his girlfriend is so much more successful than him and is doing a lot of different things and doesn't necessarily, he doesn't relate to it very often. It's he has a very hard time sort of putting himself in her shoes because it's such a world that's beyond him. And when Sasha offers to take him with her to open her restaurant, he can't do it. He's completely opposed to the idea. Some harsh words are exchanged between them, and I think it's pretty clear that for a bit their relationship has ended. And then I want to sort of talk about the last couple of scenes on their own, but they get back together and it's a happy ending for everyone. We'll get a little bit more into the nitty gritty of that because we definitely will be like diving into some of these scenes, but it does end happily. They do end up back together. But yeah, no, it's a roller coaster. It's a really fun one too. The Keanu Reeves thing is just, I'm never gonna get over that.
We'll get to
No
it. We'll
other
get
rom
to it.
com. I know. Literally. Okay, so yeah, no, that's basically the story. Um on I got to ask you though,
Okay.
when you when I was sort of telling you about the movie and I told you that it was a rom-com and everything, like what were you sort of expecting to see out of a traditional rom-com or out of rom-coms that you've seen before? Like what were you expecting from Always Be My Maybe?
Man, I haven't watched a lot of rom-com movies. Watched quite a couple animes that are rom-coms, and I do enjoy those. But I figured like
Mhm.
the format of the story is gonna have to inherently be different because the mediums are different. So I wasn't
Mhm.
particularly sure what to expect other than just like general love drama things, and probably someone's gonna get in a fight somewhere, and it's gonna be very sad. Uh, but in general, it was probably gonna be happy by the time we got together. Um,
Okay.
I was not expecting though that how they dealt with Marcus's and Sasha's relationship, and how um, the tensions in that relationship are also the things that like help drive them forward as people. Like people always talk about how relationships should like
Mm-hmm.
add to your life and make your life better, rather than like fixing problems
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. And I was really interested to see how like a lot, both of them at the beginning kind of were in relationships to fix problems in their life, but when we get to the end,
Mm-hmm.
you can see how clearly their relationship to each other actually is not fixing problems, they but helping them, uh, pushing each other to like they had to resolve their problems first, and then their relationship
Mm-hmm.
is then pushing them to be better people, you know. And I thought that was a really
Right.
cool aspect of it that I was not expecting.
Right. Do you have any, and they don't necessarily have to be from any specific rom-coms or anything. You can draw from whatever sort of media or art
Mm-hmm.
that you enjoy, but like I remember I was talking a little bit earlier about how like there are a lot of tropes in rom-coms that I find very aggressively toxic, and they're just there to like make needless drama and to, I guess like part of it is that they're trying to make the fight seem like it's like it's so bad this time it's never going to work out, and then at the end they make it work and it's not supposed to be like some great triumph, and I'm like, no, these people are like, you've done everything in this movie to make them seem like they're bad for each other, and I'm supposed to be happy that these two people ended up together at the end. It doesn't make any sense. So
Mm-hmm.
um I've seen that trope like everywhere too. It's definitely something, even if it's subtle, like it's everywhere. But are there any like romantic tropes that bother you that you think that this movie did a good job in subverting very purposefully?
um there are tropes in like anime rom-com that I noticed that like I'm not a particular fan of. Uh, whether
Yeah,
this
like what?
whether this movie subverts those or not is like up for debate, because I don't think these anime and like this movie are made in very different contexts. So if it is subverting
Right.
anything, it's not subverting it on purpose. But that, you know, um, that's just
Right.
me technically prefacing my
Okay.
answer because I do shit like that, I guess.
Okay, okay.
But I
No
know like
worries.
in a
Just
lot of anime, there are like characters who feel like feel bad about themselves and feel like they can't get women because like women just don't like them, when it's very clear that there are fundamental like personality like flaws that they have that like would not like
mm-hmm.
make them good for relationships in general. And like the true way to get over
Yeah.
this is to like really think and reflect about like who you are and like the ways that you interact with other people, and like the ways that those can be like if not just creepy um but also like problematic in like certain ways, right? And understanding how those can be
Mm-hmm.
like off-putting, and understanding how like
Mm-hmm.
your actions are like causing you to be in the situation, and not just like other people's actions. And like the solution in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
these like worse anime, in my opinion, like all the good ones don't really have this problem, which is why
Mm-hmm.
I like them. But a lot of the solutions, it's
Right.
just like you just gotta find the right harem that like loves you, and then like problem solved, no introspection needed, right? And that's like really annoying to
You can
me.
say you can say Auron High School Host Club. It's fine. You could just say that. It's okay.
Okay, but Orange High School Host Club is like, I actually do like that show for
I do too.
it does do the harem thing, but it
Wait,
also
no,
like
yes.
approaches it in a very like it to me it's a satire, but so it's fun in that way.
Yes.
But there are like worse
That's
things
a good.
that do
Yeah,
this,
no,
and
that's a
I'm just not a
good
fan.
romantic comedy show. I like that show a lot. We should talk about that rom
We
com
will,
as well. But
we will.
okay, so generally you are very annoyed with people who seem to have these like glaring flaws, and they think that the only issue with why they're not having any success with their love lives isn't because of these flaws, it's because like the universe is against them, you know.
Yeah,
Is that sort of like along the lines of
yeah. Like those things just like
yeah.
really like annoy me about rom coms. And usually, if a rom com starts like that, it's just kind of dead in the water to me after that.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. That's totally fair. Um, I think that this movie doesn't have that. I actually think that like Marcus does a very very good job of after, after he loses Sasha and they break up and he's introspecting a lot, and there's a very short scene of it where he's sort of leaving her voicemails and things, but he really tries to move forward. From this point in the story, he was living with his dad, he was only working with his dad, and he wasn't really living his own life. He was living the life that someone else sort of had planned for him. And I think that Marcus does a good job in doing the thing that would not annoy you, of like actually taking the time to figure out why his relationship went south and why it didn't work out.
Yeah,
So
those
did you notice that, and were you like very impressed by that on
yeah,
the
those
first time that you
voicemails
watched
I
it?
thought were a really cool concept because it is like he's talking to Sasha, but one, she's not responding, and two, he's still sending those
Mm-hmm.
voicemails. So it's very so it can be read in a way that like yes, those are like for her, but you can also see the introspection happening, right? And you can see him like
Mm-hmm.
coming to understand like himself and like his place in the world and like what he's done up to this point, and like he is like on the most surface level trying to talk to her, but really it does feel like a conversation he's having with himself, discovering um himself and like what's going on in his life and like how he wants to live,
Mm-hmm.
and if like this way that it's turned out right now is actually the way he wants it to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. This is so much fun. Okay. Uh, so how do you feel generally about like enemies to lovers story plot lines?
It could be done well or it could be done not well, you know? I think this is
Okay.
a better example of it, but there are, like you were talking about earlier, genuine cases in which you can have like an enemies to lover things, but it's just toxic the whole time. And like they don't
Yeah.
actually
Okay. Yeah.
ever get better about it. And it just continues to be toxic, and you're like, this isn't enemies to lovers, this is just enemies to like enemies who like sleep together. And like that's that's not healthy. I don't imagine.
Yeah. That's actually really well said. Yeah, no, okay. So then how do you feel about like friends to lovers? Think like Full Metal Alchemist, Winry and Edward.
I think frankly,
You're a fan?
it's no, it's pretty contrived. Frankly, I I I
Okay, never mind.
I I would like more media to be able to like explore like just platonic relationships as platonic relationships. That doesn't mean that they're not satisfying stories though. Like I think there's a reason why
Mhm.
it continues to be popular and it works so much is because it is
Mhm.
actually like a story format that like is nice and like has the feels, right? Though I
Right.
do think
Yeah.
it happens a lot, and there's a lot more room in media to explore just like friends to like friends, like just keeping like
Friends to friends.
but platonic relationships have like actually really strong like value in like people's lives and in their relationships to other people,
Mhm.
and I think like that's something worth exploring too. Though
Yeah.
it usually ends up as like less dramatic and probably less emotionally satisfying at the end of a movie. It's probably a less safe thing, so I understand why they don't do it.
To be fair, I think that a lot of people are attracted to drama in pieces of media because I mean, because real life obviously isn't dramatic enough, but like, I think that drama is just easy to watch sometimes, and sometimes drama can be easy to somehow empathize with, and it's fun. Like, frankly, it's just fun to watch, Like,
It is.
we all want to be sort of like in on the action. So I definitely think that a lot of romance in general leans into this conflict oriented view of love versus like a compatibility view of love, which is interesting.
Mm.
This is very much based on the idea that like opposites attract, and like, you should fight for the person you love. And generally I sometimes agree with those principles, but like there are huge caveats in both of those statements that I think are just like not at all addressed. Like, fight for someone you love with their consent. Like,
That's important. You're right. You're right. That is important.
yeah. um Like, I mean, and I see this a lot in anime too, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more in probably, the many episodes that we have planned after this. But like the idea that just because a guy fights for a woman and has done everything in his power or supposed power, right, to like prove to her that he has feelings for her is supposed to be somehow like this catch-all for her also catching feelings for him. And I'm like, that's not how feelings work.
Yeah, you're
Like
right.
you can be moved by someone fighting for you, and you can be very touched by it, and I think that there's like value in that. But at the end of the day, if someone rejected you once on the basis that like they weren't into you, no matter what you do, it's very hard to convince that particular person that the opposite is in fact true and they do in fact have feelings for you. You know what I mean? It's a very weird story
Let's
structure to sort of
let's
push.
let's take that and put our philosophy glasses on. And like
I literally.
think about that for a second. So here's my argument that I just came up with as you're saying it. So it might not be great, but um in a media landscape that is traditionally geared more towards men, uh,
Mhm.
and I think that's changing. But like traditionally, like that's how it has been, specifically like white men. But I don't think the race part matters
Mhm.
in my argument here. But just men. Um, Men are
Mhm.
like expected to like go after the girl, right? So creating a
Mhm.
story in which the man can go after the girl and like do the big gestures, and then very little thought about how she feels about it. She just immediately accepts. Is like a wish fulfillment
Mhm.
type of thing in that way, right? So maybe the reason the
Mhm.
trope is so prevalent is because the audience that these like pieces of media are like designed for, in a sense.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I think that in particular always be my maybe just really tries to steer clear of things like this. Like when Sasha and Marcus break up, yes, he sends her voicemails, but he doesn't like do anything any more particularly invasive than that. Like he doesn't chase her down until he has verification that she shares his feelings for him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like that scene where he goes to her restaurant to check it out and he goes upstairs and he sees all of the stuff that she's bought, like all the merch that she's bought from his band. And like in one of his voicemails, he was like, yeah, like we started selling all this merch and it was like so cool. And it ended up being like her, buying all of the merch. And I don't know, it was just like such a sweet, very subtle thing. But that was her way of saying, like, yes, I do care about you. And I still have feelings for you. And it was only after he had that assurance, right? He knew that for sure that he went to go chase her down.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like Marcus started introspecting and then he realized that he fucked up and he did all of that on his own. No, like Sasha gave her consent in her own way, and he found that out and then he made his action. And I really did appreciate that because as a woman too, like I'm made so uncomfortable by those kinds of stories of like
But like, wouldn't
the
you
only
also?
reason this guy got this girl is because he did a big monologue about how much he cared about her and that was it. And I'm like, great, good, awesome. Lazy writing.
But would you not also like be like kind of like put off by like persistent voicemails, especially if you're not like if you're obviously not responding? And I get her intentions are not like doesn't like him, but like
Mhm.
if from his perspective he doesn't know that or not. So like
Right.
would you not find like the persistent voicemails a little like weird in a sense?
So I think that so two things. One, yes. Two, again, I think the authors and the writers did a very good job in trying to subvert that. And here's why I think so. So
Mm-hmm.
I believe there's only a total of three voicemails. I will have to, that's just a rough number, but there aren't a lot. And then on the last one that he sends her, he basically says, like, this is the last voicemail I'm going to send you, you know? Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's it, you know. And which that kind of detail, that kind of writing detail, does lead me to believe that the voicemails that were actually played out loud in the movie were the only ones he actually sent her, because it doesn't really make sense to, like, I don't know, put that line in terms of like, okay, what was the point of that line? Okay, to show that it was the last one. You've played two other voicemails before it, signifying that those two are probably like the only other ones that he sent, you know? If they wanted to do it like he was constantly calling her and everything, I think they would have maybe put like some kind of montage scene or something like that. Again, I could be wrong, but this is how I would write it in a way that wasn't creepy, you know? Like, I'm only gonna put 3 and I'm gonna make them purposeful, and I think that like that is what they were trying to do. But I don't know, I mean, how do you feel about it? Maybe you got something else from it.
I also think there's like a part of it where like not like you can be non-literal in like art, right? And I
Yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
part
Right.
of part the main emphasis I think of that scene is him dealing with what's happening and being introspective. And the voicemails
Yeah.
are a medium to convey that. Uh, so
Yeah.
so like if we dig into the artistic intent, yes, maybe he could have been doing something that's like a bit off-putting. But
Mm-hmm.
that's not like the reason they wrote the scene, and like they seemed aware that it could have been, and like put measures in there to try to like lighten that up. So if you dig into like the artistic intent, it really feels like they were aware of this and did not want to say
Right.
this. They really wanted to say something else, and that something else was, I think, integral to the story. And this was the medium that they chose to
Right.
deliver it in. And I can
Right.
forgive
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
pieces of it for that because it worked
Yeah.
as far as that story was concerned, as far as that arc was concerned, really well actually.
Right. I actually love that. Something that I don't often think about, of like what actually is the best medium to do this. And I think that generally throughout art, and something that I'm sure we're going to bring up over and over again, is how do certain mediums convey certain messages outside of just the story, you know? So like, how does a movie differ from a book?
Hmm.
And I think that you're very right, like the voicemail was a very specific medium that they used to, because it was a movie, you know. If it was a book, they could have been like, okay, he sent these text messages, you can just read them, like I'll just put them on the page,
Yeah.
right? But the voicemails, you could hear his inflection, you could hear his sincerity, you could hear how, you know, remorseful he was when he apologized and all of this stuff, and how excited he was about the band. And I think you're absolutely right, like this was it was an artistic choice because of the medium, because it was a film, you know. That's actually really, really,
Yeah.
that's really good.
I think like if it
Okay,
were,
on the
yeah.
philosophies coming out.
That's what we're here for, right? That's what we're here for.
I know.
All right, so I
You're like,
think
it's almost, that's like,
we had a good conversation about that, but you know what I really want to talk about?
oh my god.
Keanu Reeves.
Are you gonna say Keanu Reeves?
um, I'm gonna drop like all
Okay,
the,
first of all,
yeah, go for it.
that song slaps. That song
The I
slaps.
Punch Keanu's.
So good. Yes.
Pretty good.
Yes.
It's pretty good.
It's so good. It's such a bop.
It was such a nice. That was such like a funny, great way to like back in the movie. It was amazing.
I know. It was
It
so
came out of
good.
nowhere and it was perfect.
I know, it was so good. Oh god. Okay. Well, I'll let you speak about Keanu Reeves,
Yeah.
your
So
guy.
aside from the us like let's forget all the romance stuff for a second and just talk about like the introduction of Keanu into the movie, which is like fucking perfect. Okay, literally he comes out of nowhere. So they like set it up and like Sasha like is like with this guy, right? And like the only thing we know is like she's known him for like a day and they have like a really intensely like physical relationship. That's it, right? And then
Yes.
then they bring out Keanu, right? And you're like, oh my god, like, of
Oh my
course,
god.
I get
Yeah.
it, you know? And then he sits down and then they introduce him as Keanu, and you're like, of course,
Yeah.
I get
Oh my
it.
god.
Keanu.
I think that it's so funny too because like Marcus's reaction to Keanu coming in of like his face contorting and in slow motion he's like that's Keanu Reeves is like fucking hilarious and one of the best scenes in the movie. Oh my god. No, yeah, they really nailed it on the head with the comedy on that one.
That was
And
genius
you
casting.
know why I'm going to say this?
What?
My mother does not laugh very easily in movies. She has a very high laughter tolerance. You gotta really pull the jokes out for my mom to, acknowledge that what you're
Uh-huh.
doing is working. And when she saw Keanu Reeves walking out, my mom screamed, and it was the best thing in the world. It was
Yeah.
so funny. She was like, "Ah,
Yeah, there's
it's
like a
John Wick!"
there is like an amazing like meta part of the movie that knew what they were doing when they cast Keanu to play fucking Keanu. That's just
Oh
like it's
god,
just so
yeah.
perfect. Just so
It
perfect, and I
is.
I
It's so
love it
good.
so much. And that was that like literally I'm just sitting here like alone in my watching the movie, and I'm just like laughing out loud to myself, and it's like yeah, it's
It's
one of
so
those movies. I'm
good.
like literally laughing out loud here.
I and
that was amazing. That's amazing.
and yeah, and this movie is technically a rom-com, right? And I feel like before Keanu sort of really shows up, it's not really a comedy. Like there are very dark elements to the
You're
beginning
right.
of the
I
movie,
laughed a
like
lot more after
Marcus's
Keanu.
mom passing away. Yeah, yeah, like it's they introduce like banter and like good, fun times between friends and stuff, but like Keanu is really where they pulled out all the stops to be like funny. And they really did a good job with it. Like, if you didn't like that scene, you're a psychopath. Like, there's something wrong with you, you know? Like,
Also, I don't know if everyone knows, but Keanu is part Asian, so it just means we have more Asian people in the cast.
there we go. There we freaking go. I think yeah, no, my favorite part of that scene though for sure was when they're paying for the food and Marcus is like, "You didn't even let me fight you for it." And Keanu was like, "The bill was like $5,000, which is like less than a residual paycheck for my hit movie Speed." And I was like, the way that they wrote this man, dude. Oh my god. It was so good. It was so funny. Like and
I,
they made him like the perfect balance of douche, but also good. Cause it's
yeah,
Keanu Reeves. You can't hate him.
I
You can't
love that
hate him.
I love that he's not trying to be a douche. He just is one because he's just in a completely different world. Like
Yeah,
he genuinely seems to just not get it, and like that's just
I know.
hilarious.
I also,
It's
I
like
mean,
kind of
and
like a
it
fish
was
out of water thing, but like the other
yeah,
way
yeah,
around.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, no. It was very funny for them also to just subvert Keanu Reeves as a person because I feel like generally the kinds of movies that he stars in, you think he's a very serious, very like monotonous guy, like, not very open, not very funny,
Well, he was
but
also in
his
Bill and Ted,
capacity in
so
this role, well, yes. But for the
but
most
after
part,
Matrix, I get it.
people
After
know,
Matrix.
yeah, like people for the most part know Keanu Reeves either like from The Matrix or from John Wick. Those are like his biggest movies, I'd say. And so seeing him in a genuinely comedic role, literally playing himself, was just so good. It was so good.
That was very
And my headcanon is that Keanu Reeves is actually like that in real life.
good. All right.
Okay, so I also did sort of want to talk about the not just the romantic relationships in this, but the parent to child
Okay, but
relationships that
before
are
we do that,
displayed
can we
on this
like
movie.
before we do that, I still actually want to talk about the romantic relationship, specifically uh the uh the bad ones. So Keanu, Jenny,
Oh shit.
and
Right, right,
Brandon.
right.
I think like there's a lot of value like because
Right.
we talked about like the good aspects
Yes.
in Marcus and
Yes.
Sasha's like messy relationship, but I also think
Yes.
part of it works because we have the counterbalance of like the obviously not great ones that we have. So
Right.
what are your thoughts
Yes.
on
Okay, I
pick
jumped
one or all of them? Go for it.
Right. Okay. So I jumped the gun a little bit. I'm sorry. We'll get back to the parent-child relationship stuff because that's pretty juicy. But yeah, no, I and okay, because here was the thing that I was struggling with. Right, is that
Hmm.
it's not that they're technically bad relationships. It's
Hmm.
just that the people that are in these relationships are so clearly incompatible.
Yeah.
Like they are not meant to be together. It's not that Jenny is a bad person. She's a little out there. She has like a very interesting view of the world.
She is
Um,
like very technically supposed to
the
be like the hyper uh like the hyper weird version of like someone who actually cares a lot about people, right? She is like
yeah,
supposed to be
yeah.
filling this type of archetype or like person, or maybe not even archetype. She's just supposed to have the personality of someone who's normally actually supposed to be really empathetic.
Uh-huh, yeah. And you can sort of see that, she does a lot for her community and she goes out of her way to help people, but she's also very frightfully unaware of things that are happening around her sometimes. There's that really great scene where, she's like, "Oh my God, you're such a Tran who is a celebrity chef. You have to let me cook for you tonight." Which is just like not something that you should say to a celebrity chef. And anyways, Sasha goes over there, right? She's eating what looks like spaghetti with like sriracha, and then it has like some hot dog in it,
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm thinking. Hot
yeah.
dog.
Anyways, um,
What really
and
happened is she gave me
she's
some
like,
new
"Oh, like,
ideas. That's what happened.
yeah."
I'm gonna make that tonight.
On is the chef, and I'm the guinea pig. Yeah. And then okay, and then Sasha makes the comment that like they're eating off the Martha Stewart plates, and
Okay, that was hilarious. That's
she's
why I
like, "These
stole
are
them.
Martha Stewart plates," and yeah, and she's like,
Okay,
"Yeah, that's why I stole them," and she's just yeah, she's very out there. She's
I
not a
I
bad
legit have
person. She's
friends
just
that would
not
like.
right for Marcus.
I legit have friends that would do something like that, and like I love them.
I don't know if that's. Don't say their names. Don't
No, I'm
call
not
them out.
going to, but I love them.
Oh my god. No, I mean, yeah, I like honestly, I would watch like a standalone movie of just Jenny like doing her thing cuz
Yeah.
she's funny and I like her. And same with Brandon, like Brandon is just he's really out there and he is engaged but he's very clearly not ready to be tied down yet and he just has a mind of his own and he's also very very frightfully unaware of the emotional state of the people that are around him, in particular his fiance, which is just unacceptable.
Yeah, I
And I
think
think that that's definitely the biggest thing is just it's not that any of these people are bad people really. They're bad, like they're not doing great things. Like particularly Brandon is not treating Sasha the way that she deserves to be treated. He sort of brushes over her ideas. He just ignores her when she's talking. It's just not a healthy relationship, but it doesn't mean that he's necessarily a bad person. There are some people who thrive with people like that. Like
yeah.
people who enjoy their space, people who like time to themselves. It's not that big of a deal to some people, but they're just not compatible that way. But
Hmm.
I am interested to sort of think how you feel about it. In terms of what was sort of good and bad and working and not working about those relationships.
I think the thing so there's like three things that really stand out to me. You already hit it with like Brandon, where he's like obviously just like not really thinking about how what he wants affects his like fiance. And he says he still
Mm-hmm.
wants to be in like a relationship, but it's like obviously not true, right? And I think you can say the same thing about Keanu, where you can say something about Keanu where he's his whole personality is that he just doesn't get it, you know. In the movie
Yeah.
at least, I don't know how the actual Keanu is, but in the
Yeah.
movie, like his whole thing is like he doesn't get it. And then I also think when it comes to Jenny, there was a scene where they introduced Jenny, and like she's like being really physical with Marcus, and like you can clearly see that everyone in that situation, including Marcus, is uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Um, and and I think those three things like really hit at something that I think is really important about like what these relationships show, and it's that like these relationships don't work is because like their partners aren't thinking about what their partners like are looking for in this relationship or like want, you know. Brandon like
Mm-hmm.
is obviously just thinking about himself. He's not thinking about what Sasha wants, right? Like Sasha wants to get married, he doesn't, right? And he's just like disregarding that. Keanu,
Mm-hmm.
like he's just in his own world, so he's like he's incapable of getting what other people like want in the relationship, right? And then like same thing with Jenny, right? She's
Yeah.
being very oblivious to
Yeah.
like how Marcus is feeling about this relationship, and I think like um and I think like that's something like really like important to note, and it's that like these people aren't compatible is because they just like are not thinking about like I don't think like any of these three people are like particularly like morally like evil people or anything, but like these relationships just
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally cannot work because they're not trying to like
Yeah.
engage with each other on that level. Whereas Marcus and Sasha, like the whole
Right.
arc of the movie is them engaging with each other on that level and coming to understanding and then like working it out after that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I totally forgot to cover Keanu. I was totally focused on just Brandon and Jenny, but
No, we
I would
covered a lot of
agree
Keanu
that
anyways. It's fine.
Keanu's. Yeah, we did.
His character is
But
not much
yeah,
more
no,
than what we said, frankly.
yeah. And he was funny and he was great in the role, and like, he did what he was written to do,
He fucking
but
nailed it.
again, like, it very much was a matter of this person is just not having a good time with this other person,
Yeah.
and and again, I think that something that was very interesting was that each of these relationships functioned on a certain level.
Mm-hmm.
So for Brandon and Sasha, it was their chef's business, because I think Brandon was like a business entrepreneur for chefs specifically, so like he helped chefs open restaurants and things, and so like they probably worked together very closely before, and they were probably very like good business partners. Jenny and Marcus both care very, very deeply about the San Francisco community. And you can see that a lot in the way that Marcus feels about and talks about San Francisco. He cares about conserving the small guys in the big city, and so does Jenny,
Mm-hmm.
and with Sasha and Keanu, it was that they were both really into each other sexually, and sometimes that's
Yeah.
how it goes, right? Like these relationships all work on some level, but they don't work on the levels that need to be worked on
Yeah.
for the
I
relationship romantically to be successful, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, I think these relationships work on like the level if everyone involved agreed that that was the level like that this purely needed to be, right? Like a purely like sexual
Right.
relationship is like
Yeah.
fine as long as both parties like agree that this is what it needs to be. And I'm not convinced Sasha wanted that at
Right.
the moment, and who knows what's going on in Keanu's head.
Yeah.
But that's not what that's not what Sasha wanted the relationship to be. It could have been fine if it was, but it's not.
Yeah, it was so freaking hilarious when
All right, so I pulled you
I
away from
just
what you
like
wanted to talk about. So how about we go back
no,
to
no, no,
parents?
no. You're totally good. But one last thing about Keanu was the part where he just keeps messing up Marcus's name, and Marcus gets so pissed off about it, and it's just so funny. Like, I love Randall Park. Like, he's just like he just gives me uncle vibes. You know what I mean? Like my long lost uncle. Like I love him so much,
Hmm.
and just seeing him get more and more progressively pissed off with Keanu fucking Reeves to the point where he punches him in the face was like the peak of comedy for me. Like it's never gonna get any better than this.
I don't know. I'll beg to differ on that, but we can
um
talk about those movies, shows, books later.
Okay, okay. Okay, so yeah, so this movie does not only tackle romantic relationships, it also tackles like familial relationships. And that was something that I really really appreciated. And I mentioned earlier that I watched this movie with my mom for the first time.
Hmm.
And there's this scene where Sasha is talking to Marcus about remembering San Francisco. And she's at a oh god, it's she's at like a dim sum place with him, and she's like, oh my god, like this place was so bad, I don't know why
Yeah.
like we spent so much time here. And he was like, are you kidding? Like I eat here every day. And she tries like a shumai or something, and she's like, wow, that's actually really good. Why do I remember this place as being so bad? And Marcus is like, you literally remember your entire childhood like that. And a big part of that was because her parents were never there for her. And this is also something that's brought up later in the movie when her parents are sort of throughout the movie they try to sort of inject themselves back into her life, and she's really not having it. She just tries to avoid them wherever she can. Like, it's very clear that they don't really communicate very well with each other, but her parents are really making an effort and Sasha's really not receiving it, which my mom and I had a discussion about that, and I'm wondering also what you feel about it. Do you think Sasha should have been more respectful and a little bit more receptive to her parents trying to make their way back into her life? Or do you think that her parents should have realized that she had set these boundaries and should have done a little bit more in respecting them and waited for her to sort of come to them when she was ready?
Man,
How do you feel
what?
about that?
Why are you dropping the hard questions on me like that? That's not cool.
Because this is therapy time on.
Well, I mean, I guess on like some level, uh, she doesn't like particularly owe them like anything, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
well, okay, it's hard because like, um, it's not like the reason that they were absent was because they just left. It's because like they had to like work, right? Which is like a really actually relatable thing to like, as part of like the Asian American community to understand. Sometimes your parents
Mm-hmm.
just can't be there because like they're trying to make ends meet and then like help you like find
Right.
success in your
And
life, right?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was originally going to say that she doesn't owe them anything, which is like probably still like somewhat true, but it also like complicates the
Mm-hmm.
relationship because like it's not like at any point in their lives they were actually like trying to make her life worse or not caring. They probably did care.
Mm-hmm.
That's the impression that I got. It's just that they didn't have the time to show that care the same way. But that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
really erase the hurt that she had to go through. Like you can have really good
Mm-hmm.
intentions and like genuinely have done everything
Right.
to the best of your abilities, but that doesn't change the fact that like she grew up without like her parents in her life. It's probably more exaggerated
Mm-hmm.
than it actually happens, I guess, but maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. Um,
For sure.
I think it would be at the very least like maybe she doesn't have to out of like any moral obligations. I'm pretty a stickler about saying if something's a moral obligation. Maybe she doesn't have a moral obligation, but it's definitely like I think in a way very good for her to come to terms and like forgive um what's going on here with her parents, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
she cannot continue to
Mm-hmm.
let that eat at her. It's obviously not like healthy or good for
Mm-hmm.
her, and it's like um
Mm-hmm.
probably one of like the biggest things that she has to overcome throughout the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of like the reconnecting with her parents and accepting the reality of just their situation is good for their relationship but also
Mm-hmm.
good for her personally.
For sure. Yeah. And this is cool too because at the time that she's sort of reconciling with her parents, there's a great scene where they come to her apartment and you know, she obviously doesn't look very comfortable. She's just kind of like, "Oh God, like let's get this over with. Why are you here? I don't really want to like have to interact with you any more than I, absolutely have to." And throughout the movie, she's just shown to be kind of resentful and overall pretty, just like, I don't want to say I don't want to say sad. It's like a combination between like sad and something else, but she's looking at the way that her parents are treating the kids around them right now. Because she's so successful, like her parents don't have to work anymore. And they go out of their way to throw this like huge birthday bash for, I believe, like their nephew, no nephew, like
Her
one of
cousin or
their,
something like that. I'm not sure.
yeah, it's like a cousin, young kid, something like that. And Sasha was like, it's great to see them putting in an effort. I never got anything like this for my birthday. And honestly, it hit me like a gun punch because I remember having very similar sentiments to some of the birthdays that I had to spend because like when my parents got divorced, like my mom didn't have the kind of money to just like dish out for fun things, and
Mm-hmm.
I remember a lot of those and they were pretty formative for me, and so I remember watching that scene and being like, oh God, I see myself and I hate it. But in particular, yeah, like throughout the movie we see these, and then to the scene where her parents are in her apartment and they just sort of put it out on the line for her, and they're like, listen, we know that we weren't present for you and we're sorry, you know, and they really apologize, and, you know, they understand why she hasn't been very receptive to them, and they're like, listen, we've really been trying our best, not because we're trying to prove to you that we didn't care about you, because sometimes that's how it feels, right? It's like
Hmm.
your parents didn't go out of their way to do something for you that they're going out of their way to do for someone else that is not you, you know, and you feel like that's a slight against you because you're their kid, you know, and I understand exactly how Sasha felt in that moment of like, my parents don't care about me because they're doing all of these other things for other people that are not me, and it makes me feel like they would never go out of their way to do something like this for me.
Hmm.
And her parents in turn come to her and say, listen, it's not that we didn't go out of our way to do these things for you, it's that we couldn't, but we're here now and we're making an effort and we're sorry. And I loved that, and I think that that's something that not every second gen Asian American kid gets to hear from their parents, like, ever, which
Yeah.
sucks, but at the same time, it was really, really cool that they integrated this into a rom com, like, of all things, right? It
Yeah.
was a really, really great reconciliation scene, but I'll let you sort of chime in here in terms of how you felt about that scene with Sasha and her parents, and if you thought it was, like, good timing or whatever for
Yeah.
them
I
to
think something that's
make
like
up.
really cathartic about that scene is just like
Mm-hmm.
her, like her parents. I think sometimes it feels like with parents that like they genuinely are doing the best that they can, and they don't particularly see how like the best that they can is hurting their children, you know. And it's really nice,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah,
sometimes like
exactly.
they'll like double down on that, right? And like they just won't get it
Right.
because they genuinely are
Yeah.
doing the best to their knowledge, right? But it's really
Right.
cathartic to see them turn around and be like, oh, I get it, I get what you're going through, I get how like we caused this, and we can't take it back, but we're going to try to change from now on.
Mm-hmm.
Even beyond just relationships with parents, I think just like in relationships where like anyone has like, well, not anyone, but certain relationships where people have hurt you and they don't realize, it's really nice to just like um just hear them say like, you know, I'm sorry, like I didn't know, and like I'm gonna, and they genuinely not only said that but have continued to show action that they're trying to change, which is like really nice.
No, I totally agree with you, and I think that I mean, honestly though, like, there was an opportunity for them to maybe depict something that was, like, honestly, I hate to say it like this, but, like, more realistic. Like, it's very rare for a anyone who's put in a tight position, right, to think that they hurt someone by being in a tight position themselves. You know, they're like, how does that work? Like, I was out there busting my ass 12 hours a day so that I could put food on the table, put a roof over your head, and send you to school. And you're going to sit here and say that I traumatized you? Like, that's not fair.
Yeah.
And I understand that. Like, I totally do. And I understand why parents double down on that, because it's not fair to them, honestly. Like, it sucks that
There is very little
you can't
fair in
be
this
in three
situation in
places
general.
at once.
Yeah, there's
You
very
know?
little that's
Yeah,
fair
but
in general.
yeah, no, but it's so hard too to think of this in a way that, you know, that everybody wins, because you can't, you know, your parents can't be in two places at one time, and at a certain point you have to realize that yes, you were hurt, but you have to forgive them as well. And like, this movie just goes right into that, and you know, and goes right into the nitty-gritty of it. And I appreciate them making it into a happy ending for Sasha and her parents. I
Hmm.
really do. I think that if there is an Asian American kid out there who watches this movie and knows that they will probably never be able to hear their parents say something like that, it was like, it would be really, really, really cool to just watch it even in media, you know, to see that like that kind of reconciliation is possible even so late in life. You know, like, Sasha's like in her late 30s, you know, she's lived her life. She's become her own person. Like, at this point, it's irrelevant to her whether or not she reconciles this relationship between her parents, but she chooses to do so, and her parents do as well, even though both parties understand that they're generally okay without the other. They're not willing to sacrifice that parent-child relationship. And I loved that. I really, really did. I think they could have chosen a more dark way to go with that and being like, okay, well, they're not reconciling. Like, sucks. That's just reality. But they chose to do something a lot more constructive and heartwarming. And I really, really appreciated that for sure. Another thing that I wanted to touch on, obviously, was Marcus and his dad's relationship and like how they sort of grappled with Judy, who is Marcus's mom's death, and there's a really, really, it's a sad scene, but where Marcus sort of catches his dad with his new girlfriend at their house, and he gets very, very angry with his father and pulls him aside, and he's like, "What are you doing? Like what about mom?" And Mr. Kim is like, "Marcus, like, we all have to move on, and it's
Yeah.
what she would have wanted too. And you can't make me the villain for having feelings and being a human being." And it's really hard for Marcus to hear that because, like we sort of touched on before, like, he still hasn't really grown up at all. He's still living with his dad in the house that his dad, and his mom lived in when she was still alive. He really hasn't been able to move on, and hearing his dad say move on with such a very like tangible evidence that his father has moved on is very hard for him to hear. And but at the same time, like, his dad is loving to him throughout the entire movie. It's over and over again. Mr. Kim is just going out of his way to support Marcus, like advertising his band to people, just being an overwhelmingly positive force in Marcus's life. And again, like, I just feel like we don't really see that a lot in like Asian American media. Like, it's very rare to ever even see like a 30 something year old second gen Asian in their parents' house ever, because that's like a sign of not good. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
no, right,
it's like,
like,
oh, you're a failure. I
yeah,
see
more
you,
traditional representations would be
Um,
like, oh, he's a doctor right at this point. Why is he in his family's house? Like,
yeah, yeah, no, there again, like, I just think it was a really cool way to subvert so many tropes that I've seen in the past. And like, and Marcus is still living in the house, and his dad isn't resentful of him living in the house at all. He just wants Marcus to do what's good for him and what's best for him, and he doesn't think that living in the house is good for him anymore,
yeah, I think
I
that's
don't know.
like
I really appreciated that scene.
I think that's something interesting compared to like other depictions of like Asian Americans in media is that like there's like that kind of like joke where you're like living in your house with your parents and your parents are like, when are you gonna get married, like when are you gonna move out and things like that. And like Marcus's
Mm-hmm.
dad never really
Yeah.
does that. He does push
Yeah.
Marcus to get into good relationships, not because he wants Slim to get married for like any like superficial reasons like that, but because he genuinely thinks it would be good for Marcus
Mm-hmm.
to be in a relationship with Sasha. That didn't come out the way it was supposed to. Um, right? And like
English
the
is
intentions
hard.
were different there, and I think like that actually is like a really cool thing and
Mm-hmm.
like really matters. It's kind of subtle. I didn't really think about it
Yeah.
until you brought it up.
Yeah. But it's very well done. And I think that that kind of very subtle integration of ideas, because that's the other thing too though, is it like, if a white person watched that movie, they would just kind of shrug their shoulders past the parental interactions. But as a second gen Asian American, watching those scenes where these people, these older people, right? People who are much, much older than I am, at least right now, interact with their parents in ways that spoke to me so powerfully, and in a way that was just garnered so much empathy from me, in a way that I was like, wow, I that's crazy. Like, I remember that feeling, that the exact thing that you're going through right now, I know how that feels. So very rarely do I feel that in media, unless it has to do with something like grief, or like feelings involving maybe like love in general. But
Hmm.
I mean, Hollywood doesn't really have a lot of like very meaningful Asian American relationships. And so even being able to see them in something like a freaking rom-com, right? Seeing that the writers took time to depict these relationships and give them their due was so cool.
Yeah,
It was just so touching and emotional.
I think Asian American relationship with their parents is like a very it's something that's like very I wouldn't say universal, but it's something that's like a really big topic in the community. And the fact that we don't have a lot
Mhm.
of media that helps us like understand and process that is like, you know,
Mhm.
honestly I wish there was more to like kind of like work through
Mhm.
these, because these are very complicated emotions that I figure a lot of us deal with in different varieties and ways, of
Mhm.
course, but it's a very central
Mhm.
part of like the understanding of the Asian American identity as a culture.
Mhm. And I think that it was nice to see a positive turn on these interactions as well, because while I see the traditional elements in them, I also see where the writers went out of their way to break those traditional elements. Like we talked before, like Marcus living in his dad's house when he's an older person, you know?
Hmm.
Um, Sasha being generally disrespectful of our parents. Like, I don't see that a lot in Asian media. Like, for the most part, it's like you're very respectful to your parents, right? You do everything they say. Your parents aren't necessarily like very nice to you. They're pretty cold, and like it's their way or the highway, you know, kind of thing. And so it was really really nice to see them drawing from other things, because there was I mean, again, like this movie wouldn't have suffered if they had gone that direction, you know. It was a rom-com. The movie wasn't supposed to be about Sasha and her parents or Marcus and his dad. It was supposed to be about Marcus and Sasha, you know, but giving them these deeper, more meaningful interactions with their parents. And that's the thing too, is that like your parents are like the cornerstone of so many ideas that you have about love, you know?
Yeah.
Whether it's your ideas behind marriage or sex or intimacy or what a partnership in life looks like we get all of that stuff from our parents. And I think that this is the first rom com really that I've ever seen that tackles that to the fullest extent it really possibly can, because you see the way that Sasha is affected by her parents' absence, and you see the way it reflects her views on love. You know, she doesn't trust people. She only trusts herself. She's fiercely independent. And I think honestly that was maybe a reason why she did get like engaged to Brandon, even though she wasn't fully in love with him. You know, she thought that it was good that they were both independent people doing their own thing. When Marcus started dating Jenny, it was someone who was completely free form. You know, no structure, no rules, just whatever, whenever, all of the time. But that was his life. His life was chaos. You know, he lost his mother at a young age. He never went to college. He was just really, really going with the flow. And what he needed was structure, but he gravitated towards chaos. And it's like, that's just how life forms us as people, you know?
Hmm.
And to see very clearly how their parents specifically affected those interactions was so fucking cool. I just like I could really talk about this for like hours and hours and
I
hours, but
noticed.
this is really right. No, really, this is one of the movies that like does not everything right, but the things that mattered to this movie, they really nailed it right
I
on the
agree.
head,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
for sure.
All right. Are
Yeah.
there any other scenes that we want to hit before we go?
I have a few like fun, cute ones that we don't have to like dive into, but
Okay.
the fucking
You can just
discount
say them and we
suit
can laugh and then
scene.
we're done, right?
The discount suit scene where Marcus Marcus
Yes.
Marcus goes into Tom Ford and then tries on a suit, and then he's like, "Oh, get it off, it burns." And then he goes to a discount suit store. That was hilarious. Sasha's like, or Marcus's rant about Asian food was really cool.
I really like
The way
that.
that
That was
he's
really
sort of
like,
like, yeah,
as someone who cooks a
it
lot,
was
especially cooks Asian
honestly,
food,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I really like
It,
I really understand that perspective, and I can kind of understand what Sasha's trying
yeah.
to do. but
Mm-hmm.
food to me, I feel and empathize on like Marcus's level a lot better about that.
Right. Yeah. And I think it was interesting for them to introduce those two things because that's also something that you and I have talked about in other literature classes of like the relationship between culture and food. And like Sasha uses her food and like her culture's food as a medium for expression, right? For her, it's like art, it's something that's elevated, it's something that she believes should be like revered. Whereas Marcus is like, no, that's not true to the culture, though. Like, Asian food is supposed to be served in a big ass bowl, you know, not like a glass cup, you know. And I thought it was just, I'm again like, they really put things into the script that made sense to the characters and made sense to like their worldviews and things. I really liked it.
I got a
I
question about
also
food.
really thought,
Wait. I got a question about
yes,
food. So Mrs. Kim talks about how like Korean people use like scissors for everything. Is that
oh
like
my
a
god,
thing? Because like I use knives to cut
yeah,
my
that's
chives.
the thing.
I didn't know people use scissors for that shit.
Okay, it's easier, okay? Like, get off my back.
No. I think it's
If I
like
want it, if
the
I.
ob- I think it's the objectively correct decision. The more I think about it, like it makes so much more sense to cut it with with scissors. I just like literally did not know that was a thing, right? Like I've used knives my whole life when it comes to cutting green onions. Like my world has been rocked
Yeah.
for the better.
No, yeah, like I know my mom generally used kitchen knives, but like the kitchen scissors, like the ones that come in the knife blocks, like the kitchen grade scissors, like, were like an essential tool for anything that happened in the house. Um, yeah, no, I remember that for yeah, for sure.
All
Always.
right,
Yeah.
so culturally
Um,
accurate check mark box right there.
Yes, culturally accurate check mark. We're not canceling this movie yet for being culturally inaccurate. Uh, and then another thing that I thought was just that gave me a giggle was the was when they're walking on the red carpet and Marcus was like, "You told me that people like rich people dress like homeless people now," and Sasha's like, and Sasha's like, and Sasha's like, "Oh no, like they'll just think you're a member of BTS," which honestly, white people would.
They would. They would.
Like
Like
any
straight up.
Asian, yeah, like any, yeah, they're like any Asian guy in like baggy clothes, like, oh, like who's this, you know? And I thought that was a really funny comment, because it was, I mean, if a white person had said it, it wouldn't have been funny because I would have been like, all right, let's tone down the casual racism. But like having Ali Wong say it was just fucking perfect. I loved
Yeah,
it. It was so
yeah.
good.
It's one of those things, you know. You get
Yeah, for sure.
it.
What about you? Do you have any cute thingies that you wanted to bring up just before we get into
uh,
some of our gems of the week?
man, I wish we had more time to talk about it, but the love speech scene at the end was very funny, really cool.
Mm,
I know you have
yeah,
it written down
no.
right here, and I would have liked to talk about that more, but I do think we nailed most of what I would have talked about with that speech, anyways, in like other things we did.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. No, it was very good. It was very good. We could even do like a romance trope thing where we just like take some good examples of romance tropes and bad examples of romance tropes and like maybe talk about them. But I think the love speech scene was like a very good example of an overused trope done very right.
mhm.
The epic monologue at the end where the guy gets the girl is like just so overused, but they were like, let's do something cute with it. And now every time I hear, "Can I hold your purse for you?" I cry. Oh man,
Yeah, other than that, I think we hit like every other scene in the movie. I think no stone
we
left
did.
unturned.
We did. That was a good deep dive. Speaking of sort of deep dives, though, I guess, what you consuming nowadays? Give me some gems for the week.
All right, gems of the week it is. So what? Man, I had ideas going in, but like my mind's just blanking now. So two this week is gonna be albums because you know me and music. I do love my music. Number one,
Yes, you
uh,
do.
the Blackpink's new album, Born Pink. It's good. It's not like the greatest thing I've ever listened to. The first three tracks though, I really love. Um, it's just kind of fun. Blackpink also like does most of their music in English, so like people who are like, I can't listen to K-pop because it's not in English. I'm like, okay, here's a whole album with English. uh, it's it.
Fair
I
enough.
I enjoy it more or less. Right. The
That's
album that
fair.
I'm really enjoying though is JID's new album. What is the name? I need to remember. The Forever Story. The production in that
Ooh,
album
yeah, yeah, yeah.
is fucking brilliant. JID's rapping, his flow is like on point. The storytelling that he's doing in there is great. His features are amazing. That album is potentially top album of the year for me. It's like that good. And especially like
I
someone who does like
fucking love
music
that.
production and things like that.
Yeah.
Man, there is some like real like, the more you do a certain type of art, the more you realize the small things that artists do in their art. There are so many just like
Yes.
neat
And
little
how hard it
things.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I fucking love
Yeah.
that album. So yeah,
Yeah. That's
uh,
awesome. I also really like JID. I need to spend some time and actually get into his music, but I'm glad you did music because I always feel like I do like TV shows and books and stuff because that's really like the only media I hate to say it like this, but like really pay attention to. I used to do music. Well, it sounds so bad. But
that's
I was a
fine. I mean,
child
everyone's got their
musician when I was
things, you know.
younger. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I was a child musician when I was younger, and I generally nowadays just don't really listen to music that forces me to think about it because I'm like I did my entire childhood was thinking about music and music theory and concepts, and so like give me some bubblegum pop that is simple and fun to listen to, and I'm good. I'm great. Comments on the Blackpink album, though, definitely not their best work. I was really expecting after what, like a 2 year hiatus, that we would get a little bit more than this, that, pink venom for like 5 lines for the entire chorus. I was
I
like,
mean,
great, wonderful. This is the kind of songwriting that I was expecting. It wasn't. I was expecting more, but
I've never like
I
I've never like that they kind of have like a style in MMO. I don't think
that is true.
like them singing like this that Pink Venom like 5 times over like a really catchy like instrumental break is just kind of like on par on brand for them. So
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah. No,
particularly
that's
surprised
true.
with anything. This is just like kind of like another Blackpink thing.
Yes.
I enjoy the
Yes,
first
yeah.
3 tracks. I think they're like fun, but like nothing more than that. Which is
Uh-huh.
like fine. Some music, that's all it needs
Yeah.
to be, and that's cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree. Um I just like for me this album was a little bit of a flop, I'm gonna be honest with you. I I said this in the last episode, but I'm currently watching House of the Dragon on HBO.
Okay.
But I actually went out of my way to watch like the behind the scenes of how they are making like the costumes and the sets and stuff for the show. And oh my God, those sets are all practical.
No way.
Like they've made those sets. Yeah, no, like if you watch the show, and honestly, there's some zany shit going on right now in that show. Like I don't know if you ever watched the original Game of Thrones, but like
I
there
haven't.
was plenty of incest in the first one, and they just dove like all the way in for the incest thing in this one. And like I understand that that's not for everyone.
They were like, we're not doing it right if we're
Yeah,
not like if we're
yeah.
not just knees deep in the incest. I guess
Yeah.
I've heard good things about it.
So
I do.
yeah, like
I heard the ending of Game of Thrones is not great, so I'll probably read the books instead. But if
okay,
House of
yeah,
Dragon
that's
keeps
fair.
being good, I might pick that up. That might be fun.
Might hop on that. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it's like I guess it's just like watch at your own discretion. Like if incest really freaks you out, which I know people who it really triggers them and they can't get through it, and that's like totally fine. Do not force yourself to watch that movie, but like or watch that
Yeah.
show. But I think that fantasy series in particular, as a writer and someone who reads a lot of fantasy, it's always so cool when people take the time to bring things to life in the way that the author originally intended. And like, there's just like the way that they put all of the costumes together, like the coronation cape that Rhaenyra wears when she's being crowned as heir for the Iron Throne took 5 people like 10 weeks to make because they stitched it by hand, and they were like, well, if we're gonna do this thing, we're gonna do it fucking right. And it was like, it's crazy to me to see that shit. And like, and it's, I mean, and you can just totally see like in the behind the scenes, like everyone is so committed to this art, you know, to this, to bringing this world to life, because this world means so much to people. And it's just the only thing that people keep talking about is like Game of Thrones, like the culture that Game of Thrones created, like we want to bring that to life. And I just always think that that's so fucking cool, because it's just like, it's just nerds doing nerd shit and doing it good at the highest fucking level, and it's so cool. I love it. It's awesome. Yeah, so I spent like my entire night last night, instead of doing my homework. Sorry, Dr. Kwande.
They don't even know.
Yeah, I just watching like the behind the scenes of like the House of Dragon and how they're putting everything together, and it's really, really, really cool. So, 10 out of 10 recommend that if you can watch it. But if not, I have a book recommendation for y'all. I'm reading the second book in the Three Body Problem series right now. It's called The Dark Forest. I had to double check. But Cixin Liu is a god. He's a god of literature and science and philosophy, and it's freaking awesome. Like all of his books are so good. And I would absolutely recommend that you all, if any of you are interested in like high sci-fi, reading his books and getting into them, because he tackles some really heavy shit. And he lived through like the Cultural Revolution, and he's really, really into that period of history in China too. So he really, really grapples with like art and philosophy and war, and like how those three things can intersect over science. And it's so cool. It's so cool. But I would recommend that as well for sure.
Right,
It's probably going to be those two things just for like the next next few weeks.
We're just gonna do.
I'm just going to do like small updates. Yeah.
We're gonna do a gems, and I'm just gonna like cut your part out each time, because it's just the same thing.
Yeah.
This podcast was produced by Yeji.
It was created and written by both of us.
It was edited by me.
And the cover art was done by my good friend Emma Nebecker.